Hello, and welcome to Virtual Dev Summit 2020. My name is Scott Ball. Joining me today are going to be Chris Dunn and Joel Whitney. We all work on Navigator for ArcGIS. In this session that you're going to be listening to today is what's new in Navigator for ArcGIS. We're going to be starting out by talking about how Navigator fits in with our field operations suite of apps here at Esri. After that, I'll talk a little bit about what Navigator is, just kind of give a refresher for those of you that haven't checked in on Navigator for a while or might not have ever seen it before. And then we'll get into the meat of the presentation today, which is what's new in Navigator. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. First, I'll give a high-level overview of how we think about field operations apps here at Esri. We do have a field operations suite of apps, and they help you do your field-related workflows in a number of different ways. Our mission statement when we think about field operations is to digitally enable mobile workflows with location technology. We really think about how to bring people forward from those paper-based workflows into the digital age, using location as a key differentiator. When you can use a location to do your work more effectively, we think that you can transform your business and do everything faster, more efficiently, with better return on investment, because a lot of you have already invested in ArcGIS. So we think that by utilizing these mobile apps that we provide on the Esri platform, you can extend that investment and do even more with what you got. So it all starts with ArcGIS. ArcGIS is the core of our mobile app strategy. You need ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. That's where all your data is going to live and where all your data is going to flow through. All your processing and your geoprocessing happens in ArcGIS. And so we really think about that first. So ArcGIS is the center of what we do. When we think about field operations and mobile workflows, that usually starts in the office. You don't just go out and start doing work. You usually think about what work needs to be done. And so we think about that in terms of planning the work that needs to be done out in the field. So whenever we think about planning your work, planning allows you to use location technology to plan in a more efficient way. Sending the right people to do the right jobs in the right places saves you both time, energy, effort, gas money, etc. So that's the first phase of our field operations strategy. The next phase, once you've planned your work, is navigating out to where those work items are. So getting turn-by-turn voice-guided routes optimized to take the best routes at the best times. That's really what we're going to be focusing on today. And so that is the Navigator app. And so we'll be talking about that a lot more over the next few minutes. The next piece there is the understanding piece. So once you get out into the field, you're at your work site, being able to know who and what's around you is key. So we build apps that help you understand with dynamic maps the people that are around you, the real-time status of assets that are around you. If there's a well pumping, for example, what's the current output levels of that well, or which of my colleagues are nearby. You can see that on a dynamic map. You can also take those maps offline and be able to see all of your information. Let's say you have critical diagrams and PDFs related to a particular piece of infrastructure. Being able to take those offline with you and have those available to you. You can just tap on the feature on the map, open it up, and have that with you wherever you go. That's a big part of understanding what's around you while you're in the field. Also, a big thing that we provide is the ability to capture data while you're in the field. So being able to capture real-time information about asset location and feed that information back to ArcGIS in real time if you're connected and online, or if you're not connected, if you're offline, if you're in an area that doesn't have good reception, store all that information locally on your mobile device and pass it back to ArcGIS whenever you get connected again. While your people are out in the field working, you're probably going to want to monitor what's going on. So having dashboards available back in the office to show you the real-time status of your field workforce, show you the status of how many data points have been captured today, show you where your people are. Also being able to track where your people are is a huge thing. So we have apps that help you see the last known locations and the location history of your field workers, and again, display those on a big dashboard back in the office. And the final piece is the coordination piece. So we know that not all field work can be planned in advance, and sometimes things pop up while your field workforce is deployed downrange. So being able to get those new work assignments and tasks to those people while they're downrange, have it pop up in their to-do list, see this new thing that they need to go do, and be able to go do it all while they're downrange is another key thing that we enable with our field operations suite of apps. So those are kind of the high-level capabilities. And so if I flip this slide to the next one, we can see the actual pieces of technology on the ArcGIS field operations suite that enable those things. So starting again back at the plan phase, that's really workforce for ArcGIS. It consists of a web app and a mobile app. The web app is used by your dispatcher to assign work, and the mobile app is used by the field worker to see their to-do list of assignments that have been assigned to them. Navigate, again, that's Navigator for ArcGIS. We're going to be spending a lot of time here in the next few minutes talking about that, so I won't spend a lot of time right now talking about that. The understand phase is really focused on Explorer for ArcGIS. That's our simple map viewer. You can use it on your mobile device to see dynamic web maps in real time, or you can use it to see offline mobile map packages or offline areas if you don't have a data connection. Moving into the capture phase, that's really Collector for ArcGIS. That's our map-based data capture mobile app. Survey 123, which is more of a form-based mobile app that does data capture. And then ArcGIS Quick Capture, which is our big button mobile data capture app that really is meant to be as simple as possible. You just tap on a few buttons and it will insert new features into a feature service for you. Moving around to the monitor phase, again, when you want to track your mobile workers, you would want them to install Tracker for ArcGIS and turn that tracking on. And so once they turn that on back in the office, you can use something like Operations Dashboard to see the real-time locations of those people. You can also see summaries of any of the data that's been captured using Collector, or Survey 123, or Quick Capture. You can also see the status of work that's been done in Workforce for ArcGIS. So you can keep track of everything that's going on in your field using those Tracker for ArcGIS and Operations Dashboard apps. And then moving into that coordinate phase, that's using a combination of Workforce to kind of dispatch new work to your field workers that are downrange, using Tracker to see which workers are in the right area that you might want to assign work to, and then Explorer on the mobile worker side, being able to see real-time developing situations while they're in the field through those dynamic maps that they can see on their device. So that's an overview of our field operations suite. And with that said, let's jump into what is Navigator for ArcGIS. And so if you're not familiar with Navigator, you're in the right place. I can help you out with that. And so Navigator for ArcGIS at a high level is a turn-by-turn voice-guided navigation app. You put it on your mobile phone and it helps you get from here to there. And so the key differentiators between Navigator and some other commercially available navigation apps that you might have used in the past are that, one, Navigator helps you find assets and navigate to them while offline. And so that's a huge differentiator. Most apps require you to be online to take advantage of most of their functionality. And Navigator, that's not the case. We built Navigator with offline first. So really the first thing that you do when you get Navigator, you sign in and then you'll download a map to your device. And so from that point forward, everything that's in that map is going to be on your device and you'll be able to route and you'll have no fear of getting stranded when you're out away from data connectivity. So if you're out in those oil fields or out on those timber roads, you're not going to have to worry about connectivity to find your way back home. The second piece is using your own maps, using your own asset inventory, and using your own custom roads if you have them. And so a lot of those other navigation apps don't have this functionality at all. And so we know that you, as Esri customers and ArcGIS users, you build your own maps. You've spent time creating an asset inventory, taking all of that information about the assets that you have in the field, and you've been creating an inventory, creating a catalog of all of that information. And so being able to package that up in the map that your drivers use to go out and do their field work so that they'll have all of that information at their fingertips is a huge advantage of Navigator over any of those other commercial apps. The last piece there, adding custom roads in there, I mentioned timber roads, I mentioned oil fields. These are all places where you're going to have some custom roads that don't show up on those commercial navigation apps. And so being able to stitch those custom roads into a public road network and have a app navigate you from the office all the way out to destinations in those private road, custom road areas and back again is, again, a huge benefit of using Navigator for ArcGIS. And finally, the third key differentiator is being able to use route layers from ArcGIS. So as you most likely know, ArcGIS has some really advanced capabilities and routing and optimized routing capabilities on it. And so you can use those in conjunction with this Navigator for ArcGIS mobile app to navigate your workforce in an optimal way. So for example, let's say you would want to navigate people to do a delivery route. Let's say you have 200 packages that need to be delivered and you have 10 drivers. So how do you most optimally break up those 200 deliveries into 10 delivery routes? ArcGIS can help you with that. And so you would run that through our optimized solvers on ArcGIS. Those routes can be saved as route layers on the ArcGIS platform. Those route layers can then be shared with your 10 drivers, and they would have the exact routes to know exactly how to deliver those packages in the most optimized way. And so being able to use ArcGIS in conjunction with Navigator for ArcGIS to get your drivers to the right places is the third big value proposition, and why you might want to think about using Navigator for ArcGIS with your field workforce. So talking about Navigator, there are really three ways to get those maps onto the device. And so as I mentioned, Esri provides a number of maps out of the box. And so those out of the box maps are included with the Navigator license. And so they're very high level, they're very detailed public road networks. Those don't include any of your own custom road networks. Those are just ones that we provide out of the box that you're free to use with that Navigator license. The second way to get maps in a Navigator is to create your own custom maps. So if you have your own road networks and you think your drivers are going to be just driving on those road networks, you can definitely create and use your own custom maps exclusively. You don't ever have to use any of the provided maps that we give you. You can load your own maps in there, go on your own way, have your own symbology and cartography for your drivers, never using any of the Esri provided maps if you so choose. And the third way, which I think is the most common way, is to blend Esri provided maps with your own data. So being able to take those Esri provided maps, crack them open, stitch in your own custom road networks if you want, put in your own GIS data on top of that commercial road network data, so that you would have your features, your attributes, but then a common public road network available to your drivers. This is really the most common way to go forward. It gives you the best of both worlds. It gives you the ability to put your GIS data on top of a fully traversable and routable road network provided by Esri. So on that first way, when we talk about using Esri provided maps, we do have global or near global coverage that we provide. As you can see in green, we have coverage down to local roads in those areas. So that means we have very good road networks for the areas in green. The areas in orange, we only have coverage down to major roads. So what this means in practice is for those areas in orange, you would be able to use our provided maps for high level and major route guidance. But if you want very detailed route guidance, you would probably have to augment our maps with some private road networks or some custom road networks to really take full advantage of the Navigator app in these areas. These maps that we provide, we do update them from time to time. In North America, we update these provided maps 3 times a year, in Europe 2 times a year, and all other regions we update annually. And so what this looks like, if you have the Navigator app and you have one of these maps downloaded onto your device, your users will get a notification that says there are new maps available. Would you like to download it? And whenever you have a good, strong connection, you can actually start that update and download the new maps onto your device, and then off you go. Again, all offline enabled. What does this look like when you actually start to use Navigator? As I mentioned, the first step is that you will log into your organization inside Navigator. That can be an ArcGIS Online organization, or that can be an ArcGIS Enterprise organization. Both of those are supported. You download the map from ArcGIS. Again, that could be an Esri provided map, or as we'll talk about in just a few minutes, that could be one of your own custom maps that you've made available to your users. And 3, you start using the map in Navigator. It's a pretty simple process. If you want to create your own maps, and so that's that second step that I was talking about earlier, you would start that process in Pro. And so if you want to create and use custom maps, you will go to Pro, you will use the Network Analyst extension, you will build your custom road network there. You will make sure that it works and it's connected and everything works correctly. And then you can actually package that up into a mobile map package, which you upload to, again, ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise, at which point your users in Navigator will see it as something that's available to them that they can download onto their device, and they can start routing using that custom map that you've created in ArcGIS Pro. And then the third option, which I mentioned was the most common option, is really being able to blend our out-of-the-box road networks with your custom road networks in your own GIS data. And so you can kind of see an example here in this little video that's running where we have users that have done this today. They've taken their dirt roads out in their I believe this is an oil field. They've mapped them out and they've blended everything together inside ArcGIS Pro. They publish the map, and then their user is using it to navigate, which you can see in that right-hand corner there. And everything just goes turn by turn like you would expect using any other commercial navigation app. So at this point, now that you know the high-level Navigator story, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Dunn, and he's going to tell you what's new in Navigator.
Thank you, Scott. All right, my name is Chris Dunn. I'm a product engineer on the Navigator app, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what is new in our latest release of Navigator. First and foremost, we are now supporting IWA. For those of you using integrated Windows authentication on your portal, you'll be happy to know that it's now supported in Navigator, so you can log in with those users. Biometric authentication. You can use fingerprint readers or Face ID. If you have that set up on your phone, then you can just activate that in the profile screen in Navigator, and then use that automatically to enter saved credentials for a quicker and easier login experience with Navigator. Route pausing. At any point while navigating, you can stop navigating and the app will save your spot. It will remember which stops you have visited and which ones remain. We like to call this lunch mode because it was designed with the thought that some users may create or use routes that cover their entire day and they don't want to have to leave the app running while they stop to take a break. Whenever you're ready, if you hit the resume button, the app will pick up right where you left off, and if you've moved significantly between stopping and restarting, it will recalculate a new route to the next stop accordingly. Seeing feature details, we also call these pop-ups. You can include feature data in your map packages, so you can have a layer that the user can tap on to get more information. And those pop-ups are fully customizable, similar to what you've probably seen in ArcGIS Pro or in web maps via ArcGIS Online. You can customize which attributes are shown, use field aliases, and include links and media attachments such as pictures and videos. You can also use an arcade expression to create custom attributes and present calculated or formatted values. You could have app links that go out to other apps like Explorer, Collector, Survey123, things like that. You can now edit your routes. Once you have created a route in the app, you have a few different options to change, edit, and update it. When the route is paused, you can search for new destinations or drop a pin and add it to the current route. You can also go into the route details and change the order of the remaining stops or delete stops altogether. You can also mark your next stop as visited while you are navigating. This will just skip that stop completely and automatically reroute you to the following stop. We added this feature mainly because users were running into situations where, say, they were doing a drive-by inspection, but their destination is maybe based on a geocoded location, and that happens to be off the network because it's like a building center point. Previously, if you couldn't get close enough to the actual point, then Navigator wouldn't register that you had arrived. Now, if you're in that situation, you can manually tell Navigator that you've arrived, and it will move you on to the next stop. If you haven't actually arrived at your destination, it's still 2 miles down the road, but for whatever reason you need to mark it as visited because you've realized you don't need to go there. Navigator will then just automatically reroute you to the next stop if you aren't already on the best route, to the subsequent stops. It's a really handy feature. I think people are really going to like it. You can also now use pre-planned route layers from ArcGIS. Route layers can be created ahead of time using several different network analyst or routing tools in ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS Online. A route layer is the resulting path, turns, and stops that come out of these different analysis tools. They can be simple, such as finding the most direct route to hit a few different stops, or they can be much more complex, like a multi-vehicle routing problem where you have several vehicles visiting many different stops in a set amount of time, and you want to find the most efficient set of paths to hit all those stops. I'm actually now going to demonstrate a few different ways to generate route layers and show how they are used in Navigator on your devices. I'll be showing you two different ways to generate route layers in ArcGIS Online. One is the directions widget, which is for fairly simple routes, while the other is the planned routes analysis tool, which takes more parameters and can be used to optimize creating multiple routes when, for instance, a fleet of drivers need to visit a lot of different stops. And while everything I'm showing is part of ArcGIS Online, you can conduct the same types of analyses in ArcGIS Pro using similar workflows and various network analyst tools. So whichever platform you choose to use will largely depend on where your organization's data live and your individual needs and preferences. For these two demonstrations, I'm going to pretend that I work at the best bakery in Maine, Standard Baking Company, which happens to be a very short walk from the Portland, Maine Esri office. Using the directions widget, I'm going to plan a route from the bakery to a few local coffee shops that, for instance, have agreed to sell some of Standard's baked goods. So when you select the directions widget, which is right here, and I've already clicked on it, you'll have several options for filling out the destination fields. You can simply click on the map. So here's where the bakery is, so I'll just click there for the start location. You can also search for destinations, points of interest, or addresses, which will return results from the default ArcGIS World Geocoding service or from any custom locators or geocoders that are part of your organization. So this is where our emphasis on Navigator being able to use your own data comes in. You can use it at any point in the process, whether it's in Pro or ArcGIS Online. If you have data that you need to route to, you can bring it in through all these different tools and include it. So in this case, though, I'm just going to search for a couple different cafes that are nearby. I know there is Coffee by Design around the corner. It comes up with selections just like you would expect, and that adds it to the route. I'll add another stop at Crooked Mile Cafe. And I could also search for an address, so I'll go to, say, 5 Commercial Street. And those are my 3 stops. Now, it created a route based on the stops in the order that I added them. You can click and drag to reorder the stops if you want to set your own order. Under the options down here, you can also optimize the stops. And then when you get directions, it will change the route accordingly. Another important feature is this barriers tool. So you can click or drag and create barriers that the routing algorithm will route around. For instance, if I know this street is closed, I can draw that. It'll automatically create a new route, and those barriers will be shown in Navigator. However, it's important to note that they will not be live. So Navigator will not take them into account if you reroute or if you create a new route, say while you're viewing this route layer. That is something that's hopefully coming in the near future. There are a few other options on this directions tool. You can change your driving time. You can change your travel mode from the default of driving time to any other travel mode that is associated with your routable network. So if you have custom travel modes with your routing data, if you're using your own routable network, you can incorporate those here. I'll check return to start because if I'm delivering baked goods, I want to get back to the bakery. You can also show live traffic, and that comes into play with this leave now button because you can also set the time when you want to leave. So for instance, if you're going to leave the following day at 9 a.m., it's going to be rush hour. The routing algorithms will use historic traffic data to know when it tends to be busy and possibly adjust the route accordingly. So once you set everything, you just get directions to make sure the directions are up to date based on everything you've checked. And then you can save your route, and that will create a route layer that you can use in Navigator. So I'll just call this Dev Summit Demo 1. Save that. And then I'll switch over to Navigator and we can see the route appear. And here is Navigator on my phone. As you can see under the current map, I have downloaded the main navigation map. That's one of the many Esri provided navigation maps that come with your Navigator subscription. And if I go into the map, I'm on this routes tab. I have only one route that's unavailable, which is actually one that was created for Palm Springs. But I am not in Palm Springs. So once the route I just created finishes generating, I can hit refresh on the route list in the bottom right corner. And we should see it appear. There's the demo route I created. And you can see the same stops. If I zoom in, you can see the barrier that I created that adjusts the route, and you can see all of the route details. And I can start a simulated navigation so you can see it kind of traverse the routes, and you can pause, and that's the basics of how a route layer will show up in the app. Now I'm going to switch back to ArcGIS Online so I can show you creating more complex routes with the Plan Routes tool. So that was a relatively simple workflow for a single route. Even with the basic directions tool, there are a lot of different options and different ways you can use it to interact with your data and create the best routes for your needs. But for more complex routing tasks involving optimization, multiple drivers, multiple stops, we have the Plan Routes tool. Here the stops are going to be input using a feature data layer instead of entering them manually like we did with the directions widget. And the tool allows us to set parameters like the number of stops per driver, the total length of time they can spend on the road, etc. So for this scenario, I'll continue with my fantasy working at a bakery idea. So let's say my bakery has done really well. I'm still zoomed in on the bakery location right here. And we're adding a bunch of new cafes to deliver to. And let's say I want to figure out how many drivers I need to deliver to all of the cafes every morning. I'd like them to leave at 4 a.m. when the first batches are ready, but then be back by 6 a.m. so they can help with the morning rush when the bakery opens. So using the Plan Routes tool, I can answer questions like the scenario that I just laid out. So here's my stops layer of about 30 cafes. I'll zoom out so we can see the whole thing. And the Plan Routes tool is here in the Analysis tab under Use Proximity. And for the stops to visit, you can use a point layer. Here I just have delivery stops. and I'll keep driving time for my travel mode. You can also use a barrier layer. Instead of just dropping points on the map like I did with the directions tool, you can have points, lines, or polygons that act as your barriers. So this can be very useful if you're in, say, emergency management situations and you have an active layer that is, edited by or updated by people in the field and it's refreshed regularly, and you want to be able to route around barriers like road closures due to flooding, and they're constantly being changed and updated as the situation changes. So you could use a live layer for your barriers, or it could just be like construction that you're keeping track of that changes, less frequently. But I won't use a barrier for this example. For routes begin at stops, you can have this also be a layer. If you had a different analysis layer, like you had multiple locations and you're trying to figure out which location should deliver to which cafe, so you can do a few different things with that. For this case, I will just add a point to the map. So I'll go back into my bakery right there. So that's where I'll start. And then my start time, I'll set it to tomorrow, and I will set it to 4 a.m. That's when I want my drivers to take off. And then for the end, you can either also add points to the map or have a different feature layer, or you can just have them return to start. And in this case, they'll return to start because I want them to be working at the bakery. Zoom back out a little bit. So this is where it gets interesting. So maximum number of vehicles to route. Since I am trying to find out how many vehicles I need, I don't actually know the answer to this question, the minimum number. So for maximum, I'm just going to put in 99. The tool can handle up to 99 routes, so I know it'll come in less than that. So this way, it'll just find the best number for my needs. And the maximum number of stops per vehicle, you might only want each vehicle to go to a specific number of stops. And again, in this case, I am trying to see how many vehicles I can use, so they could hit a variety of stops. Some might hit 3, some might hit 10. So I'm going to put in 37. That's how many stops I have in my layer. So it'll really just give me results based on the minimum number of vehicles, not the actual number of stops they're hitting. And time spent at each stop, let's say I know from experience it takes about 8 minutes for a driver to find parking, get inside, drop off the baked goods, get the signature, and get back on the road. And then limit the total route time per vehicle. This is where my scenario comes into play. If I'm having them leave at 4 a.m. and I want them back at 6 a.m., then I'll give them 2 hours. And then you just need a layer name. So I'll call this Dev Summit Demo 2. And the most important thing is check this Include Route Layers button. That way the resulting layers will actually be saved as route layers that you can access in Navigator. And finally, use current map extent. I want to uncheck that because I want to make sure I'm using all of my cafes, and right now they're not all shown. I'll just zoom out a little bit. And then I can just hit run analysis and it'll do its thing, think for a bit, and then it'll return the routes. So as you can see, the tool returned a warning saying only 6 out of 99 routes are needed to reach all stops. That's perfect because that's the question I was trying to answer. I need 6 drivers if I want to hit all these stops and have them back by 6 a.m. to help when the bakery opens. So I hit OK, and then I can view my routes. I'll zoom out a little bit and you can see all the routes that were generated. There's a couple in downtown Portland that if you go out to hit these outlying bakeries. Other interesting questions that you can answer from an analysis like this would be sort of how to add new stops in an efficient way, like this route here. If you click on it, you can see it's only hitting 3 stops and the total time is only 60 minutes. So they have a whole nother hour where they could be stopping at other cafes. So I should do some research and see if there are any along this route that I can reach out to try to sell more muffins. And now instead of refreshing the layer list in the Navigator app like I did with the directions tool route, I'm actually going to open this using a URL link into Navigator. A URL link allows you to launch a native app from another app, website, or email. My colleague Joel will be covering this in more detail shortly. And here's the app link to Navigator that I sent myself. You can see it just begins by calling the Navigator app, and then it has a few parameters. It's got the route item ID, which is the item ID from ArcGIS Online for that route layer that I want to traverse, and it ends with navigate equals true. So as soon as I launch the app, it will immediately begin navigating the route. So I can just tap on that. It will pop in a Navigator, load up the route, and you can see it's starting at the bakery, and it also is going to end there, which is why stop 9 is there. I can zoom out while it's navigating and see all the stops that I'm going to hit. And I can show the mark stop as visited button that I mentioned earlier. You can see stop 1 is grayed out, and it recalculated to take me to stop 2. So to sum up, I've shown you 2 ways to create route layers, the directions widget and the plan routes analysis tool. And while both of these tools exist in ArcGIS Online, there are similar tools in Pro if you prefer to go the desktop route. And whichever you use, any of the tools can be accessed and automated using ArcPy or the Python API, which I will talk about in more detail in a bit. If you're using the Network Analyst in Pro, you're probably already familiar with some of the tools available, such as Create Route, Closest Facility, and Solve Vehicle Routing Problem. The key thing to know now is that the output of those tools, the route that actually exists in Pro, can be brought into ArcGIS Online and then into Navigator. You can do this either using the tool ribbon. There will be the Share as Route Layer button at the end of it, or there is the Share as Route Layers toolbox tool under Network Analyst if you have route layers you have already created from previous projects that you want to then get into ArcGIS Online. If you're not already using these tools in Pro, you might be better off starting with the ArcGIS Online options, but the Pro ones do have a few more options available, and if your routable network already exists in Pro, then this might be where you want to start. And now we're moving on to Joel, who will be talking about app linking.
So we've seen some great demos and examples of the power of Navigator and how you can use that for offline navigation using your own custom data. But now let's talk a little bit about how you can expedite the process of getting routes out to your drivers. Linking is a way for you to quickly send a route to your driver, and it's been around for quite some time. We've added quite a few new capabilities for this latest release of Navigator. First is the ability to use the web scheme style URLs. Previously, we only supported the custom scheme style URL, but for those of you who are familiar with that, there are some limitations, especially if you were on the Android platform, where you weren't able to share the link in an email, and then the field worker wasn't able to tap on the link. Now that this is a standard HTTPS style URL, you can pretty much share across different platforms, and the URL will be able to be opened by the field worker. There's also a website backing this URL, so if for some reason the user doesn't have the application installed on their device, they'll be brought to this website that informs them how they can get the application installed. We added a couple new parameters for this latest release. We added the ability to specify an item ID if you want to open a specific mobile map package, and we also added the ability to specify the route item ID. So we've seen some great examples of the power of pre-planned routes earlier in this presentation, and you can now provide a link to your field worker to those routes. So for those of you who may not be aware of what this linking technology is, really it's just a method of invoking and then passing state information between applications. So as Scott showed earlier in our slides, we have a lot of different mobile applications that we offer, and most of which are, designed to perform relatively simple tasks, yet they can be paired to perform these complex workflows. And we use deep linking as this way to link these apps together. And we're all familiar with this technology, and we use it pretty much every day, even if it's not always apparent to us. One example of this is with web links. I think pretty much all of us have opened up an email or gone to a website, clicked on a hyperlink that then takes you to a different website or a different place within that website. So these are designed to take you deep into a website given a specific context, and this context could be, either a file path or some sort of parameters that are attached onto that URL. Now, for the sake of what we'll be talking about today, when we talk about links, we'll break it down into two components. First, the scheme, and this will be the identifying information for the being opened, and then we'll also have some parameters. So this will be the app-specific data that we'll be attaching onto that URL, and this will be the context for that application. And, as we've kind of talked to, this is the technology we use when we want to link between some of our applications. So for instance, when we saw earlier, the example of launching Navigator to get directions from Explorer or Collector, these are essentially under the hood using this URL scheme, this deep link, to launch the Navigator application and provide it the location and the name of the stop get to calculate the route for. But you can also use this same technology as, directly as part of your workflows, whether that's URLs embedded in QR codes that your drivers scan, a email with some hyperlinks to their routes, you can do, and they simply have to tap on that hyperlink to launch the Navigator application. Or you can even embed it in your own app. So just like we embed these URLs behind buttons in our apps, you can do the same thing in your app like you see here. So it's a really powerful technology, and it's a way to kind of integrate two different applications to provide this seamless experience for your user. Now, there are a lot of different things you can do with these links. Here are all the different parameters that Navigator supports. You see at the top there that we support that HTTPS style web scheme, and we also support this custom scheme as well. The web scheme is definitely preferable and what you'd want to use. There's very limited cases for why you'd want to use the custom scheme over that web scheme. Now, as far as parameters go, you can launch Navigator and open up a specific map if you'd like. You can open up a route item ID for a specific route layer. You can provide, a start location of your route, as well as any number of stops that you'd like to include in that route calculation. If you do provide a number of stops, Navigator will calculate that route in the order the stops appear in the link. If you'd like Navigator to find the best sequence for those stops, you can provide that optimize equals true parameter, and that will optimize the route client side on the field worker's device. If you provide the navigate parameter, it will immediately start navigation once the route is loaded in the app. You can also provide a travel mode if you want. And then you can also provide a callback and a callback prompt. And the callback and callback prompt is important because, when we link out to Navigator from apps like Explorer, for instance, we really want the field worker to go over to Navigator, get their directions, get their turn-by-turn directions, but then when they arrive at their destination, we don't want the field worker to be stuck in that application or have to figure out how to traverse back to the calling application. So by providing the URL for the application that you started from as the callback value, it will actually open that URL, which results in, the system launching the Explorer application. And we'll see some examples of that here in a second. So some common workflows, first, obviously the one we talked about a little bit ago is just opening up Navigator to a specific map. You can also enhance that a little bit by adding that route item ID, and this will load, a route that you created, a pre-planned route for your field worker. You can provide a single stop, which is basically just a stop from your current, a route from your current location to the stop provided. Or you can provide any number of stops. And here you see I have that optimize equals true added on, so that will find the best sequence to all those different locations from my current location. And then there's an example of using the callback. So basically what will happen is when the route completes to that one stop, it will prompt the user, do you want to return the collector? And if they say yes, it will open the collector app. Okay, so let's take a quick look at what that actually looks like and how you can use these links. I'm going to show you real briefly how you can scan some QR codes and launch the Navigator app. I'm also going to show you how you can add in your own custom integration to Navigator in a custom app. So if I switch over to my phone, okay, here I have a QR code scanning application that I made. It's really just to help me with demos. So what I can do is I can scan this QR code and we can kind of inspect, what's going on in that URL. So here we see we have that Navigator web scheme. I'm providing an item ID for the map I'd like to open, starting location, as well as a number of stops. You'll notice these are actually features in one of my feature layers in the map, and it's going to search for those features and find the matches and then calculate a route for all those different locations. So I can go ahead and open that, and you'll see that the route was calculated, and I can start navigating to all those different things. As Chris showed earlier, you have the ability to pause if you want, so you temporarily end that. Allows you to, click on features, view their attributes, and then you can pick up where you left off and resume. Now, as I said before, if you provide a list of stops and a URL, Navigator is going to calculate it in the order it appears in this list, which you may want at times, but sometimes you also just want to pass Navigator a bunch of stops and say, hey, find the best route for me. To do this, all you have to do is simply provide that optimize equals true at the end of your link. And then if we open this, you'll notice it's a little bit hard to tell, but it actually is those same stops, but yet a slightly optimized, a more optimized version of that. The routes have been, the stops have been reordered to find that best sequence. And then as Chris showed earlier, you can also, open up one of these pre-planned routes in Navigator, and we can simply pass in that item ID for that pre-planned route. And then we can open that up in Navigator. You'll notice that the barrier comes along with that route layer, and if any recalculation needs to occur, it will take that barrier into consideration. So that was just a quick demo showing some of the power of the Navigator link. Now let me switch over to this custom application I have. And this custom app is just basically a little demo showing, you might have your own work order management system that you have to keep around for some reason, but you want to integrate it into your GIS. So have an application like this, you can tap on one of these work orders, you can view it on your map, and then you can have some of these actions here. So for instance, I have some action buttons to Navigator, Explorer, Collector, and even Tracker. And this is a great way to delegate some of these more some of these tasks that you don't really want to build into your own custom application, and delegate them out to our applications. For instance, if you don't want to build in turn-by-turn navigation into your app. So what I can do is, I can actually show you the code behind that button. Here we're looking at Xcode, and we're looking at this button that I've created, and it's using this following link. So it's actually using this link to launch a specific map, to creating a route from this location, and it's creating this stop location. And it's providing this callback where it's actually saying, once the route completes, I want to open back up my custom application, and I want to mark this location as complete. So if I actually go ahead and get directions to that work order, tap go, you don't get to hear that turn-by-turn audio while we're presenting here, but basically what we'll see is when this route completes, you'll get this dialog that appears, and it says, hey, would you like to return to integrator? And if I say yes, it will pop me back over. And since my app knows how to read one of these links, my app opens, it says mark this location as complete, and then you can see the UI respond accordingly. So that's just a couple quick demos, a couple quick examples of how you can use these Navigator links to enhance your workflows. And with that, I'll pass it back to Chris.
Thank you, Joel. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can streamline some of these workflows using Python. So the automation capabilities of the Python API and the ArcPy module extend to the creation of route layers, as well as all the other tasks you can do with them. They have tools for map creation, data management, working with ArcGIS Online, using the Python API, doing all sorts of spatial analyses, including network analyst tasks, which will create the route layers. And it also has an apps module that helps build the app links that can be sent out to send these route layers to your users in the field. So I'm just going to do a quick sort of demo walking through a Python notebook showing how this can be put into play using the plan routes module that I showed earlier. So here we have a Python notebook that will create route layers using the plan routes tool. The data and the steps come from this plan routes for food inspectors lesson that's on the Learn ArcGIS website. So you can find that on there if you want a little bit of background and context. Though these steps are not there, that does not deal with automation on this notebook. is not publicly available yet, but it will be soon as part of a more detailed lesson on automating route layer creation. So once you get your GIS set up by logging in, there are a few steps in here for geocoding locations, which I'm going to skip over because those are more specific to the lesson. But basically it's creating 2 layers, one for restaurants that will be visited by food inspectors, and then one for the inspectors' homes where they will begin their day. So it's a little bit different from the bakery example I used before, because those all started from one location, whereas these started at 5 different locations. So the algorithm, found routes from each of those individual locations instead of from one location that they all started and then returned to. So once you have all of your input layers created, you can perform the actual analysis. And here, all of the inputs that go into the tool are the same ones that I covered earlier. So you use your features.analysis.plan routes tool, and then you just put in a lot of the same data. You've got your stops layer, which here's the restaurants. You've got the number of routes to generate, maximum stops per route, the time aspect, a start layer route ID field, which is important when you have multiple start locations, because that field is used to differentiate the resulting routes, so you know which start location they are associated with. If you don't set that field, it'll look for certain parameters like name or route ID or things like that. There's a layer for where the routes will end, and then the other time component and the total time they're allowed to spend on the route. So the real important thing here to take away from this is, if you're using Python to generate your routes, all of these parameters are variables that you can input new data as your data changes, as your needs change. If you're going to be creating a lot of routes to a lot of different data, and you'll have different needs from day to day depending on what your stops are, you can use Python to automate that process dynamically, so you don't have to go in and change things every day when you generate your new routes. You can do all that ahead of time using the Python API. You could do something similar in Pro with ArcPy if you're going that route. Another advantage of using Python is that when those routes are created, they all have a route layer item ID in the table that will be created, and then you can pull that in to create your URL link and have it sent out to them, which we have here as the last step, and you can see what those URL links look like. And there we have it. That was a brief overview of using the routing functionality with the Python API. No matter how you approach route creation, all the different tools out there have similar inputs like start points, endpoints, destinations, and things that will affect your route like barriers and travel modes. No matter how the route layer is created, they can all be accessed in Navigator and used by your drivers or field crew to get where they need to be efficiently.